Now, after much controversy, it's been decided that the 2022 World Cup in Qatar will not be held in the summer, according to a FIFA executive. Now, in fact, let me just show you this. We have, there we got it. There you see him, FIFA's Secretary General Jerome Valcke, announcing the decision during an interview with Radio France. He said the dates for the World Cup in Qatar will not be June to July. To be honest, I think it will be held between the 15th of November and the 15th of January at the latest. But Valcke's announcement will most likely still have to be ratified by FIFA's executive committee and apparently came as a total surprise to Britain's FIFA Vice President Jim Boyce. Either way, though, the event has been mired with controversy. Qatar, the first Middle East host of FIFA's World Cup, is spending an estimated $100 billion on infrastructure projects, $20 billion on new roads, constructing 9 stadiums, and 55,000 hotel rooms, all of which will be built on the back of migrant workers. They make up 90% of Qatar's population. Now, human rights groups and foreign governments have long criticized Qatar's use of migrant workers, claiming they are treated as virtual slaves. Critics point to the institutionalized exploitation of workers from South Asia, who mostly come from Nepal, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. The International Trade Union Confederation has estimated that 4,000 migrant workers will die before the games even kick off in 2022. An investigation by The Guardian in particular revealed the most shocking levels of mistreatment, saying that Nepalese construction workers were dying at a rate of almost 1 a day this past summer. Now, joining us to discuss all of this is Omar Aziz, who wrote this op-ed in the New York Times. Omar, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us, and I want to start by asking you why you felt compelled to write this op-ed.
Well, thanks, Ahmed, and to Huffington Post Live for having me. The piece in the New York Times was actually accidental. I was already doing research on the Gulf region, on Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, and their human rights violations in the World Cup. And around that time, I happened to watch the great film 12 Years a Slave. And as I was walking out of that film, someone made an offhand remark, innocent, not malicious, that, well, at least slavery doesn't exist anymore. And that struck a personal nerve with me because I'd been doing this research, and I thought to myself, well, it does still exist. It exists in the Middle East and elsewhere. And so we talked to the New York Times about getting this piece out, and I'm glad it started the conversation that it has.
Most certainly. And, Omar, the reason we wanted to have you on, and, quite frankly, on a personal level, I worked and lived in Qatar for some time. And I agree with you. I mean, I feel like this isn't a story necessarily that often gets a lot of attention. And so in your piece, you say that there is still time to pressure Qatar to reform its legal regime and improve its treatment of migrant workers. You also point out that the European Parliament, recently passed a resolution demanding, quote, that FIFA send a clear and strong message to Qatar that the 2022 World Cup shouldn't be delivered, by the assistance of what you're calling and what they call modern slavery. But Omar, what, in your estimation, can really be done about this? I mean, who can actually pressure Qatar, and will FIFA or the U.S. or anyone else actually do that?
Well, FIFA won't. I think that they've been, as we said, they've been mute about this, and it tarnishes their images. Another player from France, Zahir Belounis, also fell under the kafala system, and he was his wages were withheld, and he couldn't leave the country, and that was only recently resolved. But in terms of the powerless here, there's only one way I can see forward, and that is if the United States, in conjunction with European governments and Latin American governments, get together and demand that these abuses stop, or they will at least threaten to boycott the games. That's the only way, because Qatar is still worried about their reputation now. They're sort of modernizing very fast, and they're worried about their soft power and how they'll be perceived in the West. They've appointed a commission to study this sort of abuses, but there's been no concrete steps taken. And so I think on our end in the West, we need to step up our game and make sure that we're pressuring the Qatari government, as well as companies there as well, because at the end of the day, they're complicit, if not responsible. Most
certainly. And Omar, obviously, many multinational companies do business in Qatar on the back of, trying to actually prepare Qatar for the games. What do you make of the actual kafala system that you outline, which is something that's not specific to Qatar, but really something that is specific to the region, the GCC. People who don't know what this is, as you describe it, employers have legal responsibilities for their workers, so it should ensure protection from unfair treatment and from abuse. But you say that laborers, according to the kafala system, cannot legally work more than 8 hours a day. But the reality is that workers sign one contract before arriving to Doha, and that is often ripped, and then later they're forced to sign another contract with big reduction in wages. I mean, aside from the Guardian piece that we referenced, is there proof? I mean, is there concrete proof that this happens, or is this, are these just testimonials from migrant workers?
Well, they are testimonials, but look, basically any human rights organization you can name, they've studied this. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the International Labor Organization, which was behind the Guardian investigation. And they've all come out and said, look, this exploitation of workers is happening. And these workers are not, they don't have the capacity or the financial means or the education to challenge the kafala system. They're poor, many of them are uneducated, and they spend thousands of dollars, their life savings in some cases, to recruitment agencies to get from Bangladesh or Pakistan to Qatar to work. And then they sort of see their livelihood ripped up right in front of their eyes. And they have no choice but to stay because A, they can't leave, and B, they've already spent most of their money, so they need to send some dollars back home. As for the kafala system, I think in theory, it would work. And for example, you mentioned, as we said, on paper, workers in Qatar can't work more than 8 hours a day. But in practice, they work 12, 14, 16 hours a day.
Right.
Some of them are denied water in the desert heat. And so in practice, it does amount to, I think, a horrible exploitation.
Yeah, and Omar, one line in your piece, you talk about the U.S. and its partners needing to hold Qatar to account. Obviously, there's the geopolitics angle in all of this. Many people have long criticized the U.S. and other Western countries for turning a blind eye, not just to abuses against migrant workers in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, but also, popular uprisings, peaceful protests that are crushed quite brutally by the United States' allies. So if the U.S. was not interfering, when, for example, Saudi Arabia did crush the uprising in Bahrain, and when there are other reports of torture that we see from those countries, I mean, why would FIFA and the World Cup prompt them to do so?
I think it's similar to what happened in the Beijing Olympics in 2008. The two biggest sporting events globally, which bring more attention than anything else, international media, journalists, and the like, are the Olympics and the World Cup. And so in 2022, the world's journalists, the world will be in Qatar. And if this sort of exploitation is still going on, it will be exposed. And so in the case of, say, Saudi Arabia or Bahrain's exploitation and suppression of its uprising, the United States can sort of get away with playing a double game, with supporting the dictators. But if, the world is watching Qatar, as it was in Beijing, then the United States' sins will be, they'll come to light, and I think, and FIFA's and the European countries. So it's in their interest, yeah.
Certainly an important point there. And perhaps one to end on. Omar, thanks so much for being with us.